What if I told you that if you wanted to get in the best shape of your life, you didn't need to learn more about training, you didn't need to learn more about nutrition, and you didn't need to go out and buy any new supplements? What if the thing you really need to do is pick up a book and learn about philosophy? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to learn exactly why you need to put the phone down, pick a book up, and start learning about some of these deeper ideas if you really want to level up within your fitness journey. Hi, my name's Emma. I'm a bodybuilder and an online fitness coach. And now that I reflect, I'm also a little bit of a philosopher, and I can honestly say now that I reflect back on my own journey within fitness over these last 10 years, the real turning point for me within all of that was picking up some of these books and starting to learn a little bit more about myself and the world and some of these deeper ideas. And I think at the time when I started delving into philosophy and books and mindset, I didn't necessarily think that it was helping my fitness. But now that I look back, I can see that that was the catalyst for me truly changing. And I know this is a bit of a different topic. Maybe it's something that you wouldn't really expect people to be talking about. I fucking love reading. I fucking love philosophy, and I just am excited to make this video because it's what I've been thinking about for quite a while. And anyone who follows me, especially on Instagram or you watch my YouTube vlogs, you'll know that I read every single day. I have probably every single book you can possibly think of over the last 6 to 7 years. And I just know that doing this can really unlock so much potential within you. And so today I just want to share some of that with you. So to give you some context, I did not walk out of the womb being able to stick to a diet or be consistent with my training. See, for a really long time, I had a very terrible relationship with food. You know, growing up as a teenager, I couldn't stick to diets, I hated my body, I had no ability to regulate my emotions, and I just found the whole process of fitness and being consistent pretty much impossible. And I very much believed that that was just the way that I was. I thought that I was stuck like that, it was just who I was, and I very much adopted that as my identity. I had all these beliefs that I just wasn't good at dieting, I just had no willpower, I just couldn't say no to cakes or biscuits or chocolate, and because of that I was just destined to basically be fat for my whole life. I really, really did believe that. But now that I look back, I can see that it wasn't that I didn't have discipline, but my biggest problem was genuinely that I did not know how to just sit with my own mind and be with my thoughts. And learning philosophy, discovering some of these books and discovering the words of some of the greats throughout the ages, that for me was such a huge turning point within my own journey. And it's not because reading these books made me feel super motivated, but it was because they showed me how to actually reflect and sit down and analyze the way that I was thinking and the way that I was feeling, and then the way that I was reacting to those thoughts and to those feelings. Because of reading, I learned how to observe myself, not judge myself, not attack myself. And honestly, that's just what changed everything for me. So for a bit of backstory, I started getting into reading and philosophy and mindset around 2019, 2020. So we all know what was going on in the world at that time, and I was just very much trapped inside my house. I didn't really have anything else that I could be doing. You know, I was in university at the time, and I'm pretty sure we were on our summer break. And so I took the opportunity to start looking inside of myself, and I used books to do this. I started reading some of the classics, you know, things like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is the exact same copy that I bought all the way back in 2020, and it's very worn and very marked, but it is very beloved to me. You know, other books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle or The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I mean, all of them. There's just so many books, you know, The Tao Te Ching. I've got my copy right here. And I really believe picking up some of these books, it changed not just the trajectory of my fitness journey, but genuinely of my whole entire life. I would not be the woman I am today, sitting here recording this video, if it wasn't for picking up these books. So as I said, at the time, I was in university. I was about to go into final year, and on paper, everything looked great. I was coming top of my class. I was, you know, on the path towards applying for PhDs, but on the inside I was so lost. At the same time, in 2019, I just had my first experience of dieting properly, of working with a coach, of, you know, learning a little bit more how to do things properly. But because of everything that was going on in the world and the stress that I was experiencing, I had fallen back into a lot of my old behaviors with binging. You know, I had suffered really badly with binge eating disorders for years leading up until then, and a lot of those, old behaviors, they acted as a bit of a crutch for me to fall back on in that time when everything just felt so up in the air and so chaotic. But at the same time, because I had had that positive experience with the coach the year before, I remember in the back of my mind that thought starting to enter, could I coach one day? Could that be something that I could do? I absolutely adored fitness. It was my life. I spent so much time learning about it. I was so interested in it. And having that thought of, could I be a coach one day, when, externally it looked like, well, of course she's going to go and do a PhD. That terrified me, because it felt as though I was going to go completely off the path that had been laid out for me. But I think because of reading some of these books, I started to realize that I was living a life that was just not aligned with the values I had anymore, or who I wanted to be. But more importantly than how it impacted my whole life, as I said, this massively impacted my own fitness journey. And so what I want to do in this video is basically just, I guess, intro some of these ideas. I am thinking about doing this as a bit of a series. So, in subsequent videos, I'll take one of my favorite books and really break down a lot of the core ideas of how that helped transform my own fitness journey. But just for this video, I just want to go over a bit of a general overview of some of the core shifts that really happened for me when I started to look inward, when I started to study, some of these philosophical ideas a little bit more. And, I guess what I'm hoping for somebody who watches this video is maybe you'll go and pick up the same books, because again, I adore some of these works, and they're books I think just every single person should read. Whether you're interested in, getting better results with your fitness, or you just want to change your life, you just want to be happier, you just want to be healthier, I truly do believe that there's nothing better that you could do for yourself. So let's get into some of the biggest shifts that happened for me within my own fitness journey, from that girl who had a terrible relationship with food, had no consistency, to now this version of me who's a bodybuilder. I've competed, I've won shows, I've won pro cards, I've coached hundreds of women in their own journey, I've built a business, I've built a life all around fitness. And as I said, I think now, as I reflect back, I've learned more from a Roman emperor 2000 years ago about how to be a better athlete and be a better coach and be a better human, probably than I've learned from any course I've done about training or food or anything in that realm. So I want to dive a bit more into my old relationship with fitness and what that looked like at the time. As I said, my relationship with food and with myself and with my training, back then, it was very emotionally reactive. For example, if I went off plan, if I cheated on my diet, I didn't just look at that as a mistake or a slip up. I very much allowed that to shape my identity as a failure. I would use that as evidence that I just had no discipline, couldn't stick to anything. I just wasn't one of those people who could get lean. I thought I'd never, back then, I loved bodybuilding. Even then, I admired bodybuilding, but I always said, oh, I could never do that. I mean, I could never diet like that. And now I sit here in front of you and I could literally, I could eat fucking 800 calories for weeks if you asked me to. I'm not saying I would want to, but I could do it if you asked me to. But at that time, let's say I did cheat on my diet. That was a week or a month that I would then just go completely off the rails, because I just thought, well, I failed now. And the reason, it wasn't that I didn't care, it wasn't that I didn't want to get results, but it was because I would completely identify with that mistake. I wouldn't think oh, I've just messed up. To me, that was proof. That was undeniable hard proof that I am a failure and I just can't do this. And this is where, it is at this exact point that diving into philosophy, it saved me. And as I said, there's a few big core shifts that happened to me as I learned a little bit more about this whole world. Because, if you had said to me at 18 years old, oh, go and read a book about philosophy, I would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, I'm not doing that. But I think at just that time, I just maybe felt so lost. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try anything. I'll try anything. So we tried Roman emperors. Why not? And so in this video, I'm gonna share the 4 biggest shifts that I can now acknowledge I went through as I started on this journey of, self-discovery, philosophy, whatever you want to call it. So around this time, through reading, learning a little bit more about this whole world, something clicked for me. And it was this idea that you are not your thoughts, you are the one observing them. I still remember being in my bedroom, I was reading The Power of Now, and I read this sentence where he said this, and it was like being slapped in the face with reality. I can remember it was almost like an out of body experience. I don't know if it was a little bit of a spiritual enlightening. I don't know what it was, but it sounds so obvious when I say it out loud now. But that, to me, at that moment in time, it was the biggest breakthrough I've ever had, because I had spent my whole life fully believing every thought that I had. If I had the thought, I can't do this, I believe that to be true. If I had the thought, I'm a failure, I believe that to be true. If I had the thought, I'm not good enough, I believed that to be true, because I thought that that voice was me. And when I learned that that voice is not me, and that I'm the one who's listening, it was like, whoa. Because immediately in that moment, what happened? That voice lost its power. Because I now understood I didn't have to do what the voice said. I could listen, I could observe, I could acknowledge, but I did not have to do what it said. I did not have to react to what it said. I did not have to let that voice run my life. I understood that I could listen and I could go, okay, that's not helpful, and I'm actually not going to listen to you now. See, so many people, they don't understand this, and so they go through their life just so entangled within that voice in their head, that chatterbox who just won't shut the fuck up. And if you're like me, she never shuts up. It's just constant. It's constant mental blah, 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 blah. But it's not you. Where is that voice like coming from? Who is it? You might be wondering. It's conditioning. It is conditioning. It is old patterns from when you grew up, the people that were around you, society, like as a female, society told us you need to be smaller, you need to be pretty, you need to be quiet. And so that voice adopts all of those stories and it starts telling you these things. And these voices, these stories, unless you understand that they're not you, they will run your life. They will completely take hold and they will run your life and they will direct your life for you. And it's not just your thoughts. I mean, it's everything. It's your urges, your emotions, every single thing you feel. You believe that that's just the truth. You never put those thoughts up for review. You never ask yourself, is it actually true? Because you just believe that those thoughts are you. And so when I realized that I'm not the voice, I'm the observer, it gave me the ability to watch and to observe. There were so many things I was believing about myself to be true that were never true. I believed that I wasn't worthy. I believed I was ugly. I believed I would never be able to get in shape. I believed I wasn't fun to be around. I believed so many things about myself because of all of the experience I had been through, conditionings, patternings, trauma, whatever you want to call it. I believed these things. And I was so tangled up in them that I couldn't even see the truth. Because the truth is, I wasn't a failure. I wasn't someone who just couldn't diet. I wasn't someone who just had no discipline. But I was allowing these stories to just play out again and again and again because I was never challenging them. I was never sitting and observing. And so instead of judging myself and judging the voice, I just started to become curious about it. I would ask myself, why do I think this? Where is the evidence for this? What led to me feeling like this? What can I learn from this? Again, every emotion, it's just a signal. And they are always there to teach us something. And so by observing the thoughts and by observing the feelings, I learned that I could just let them pass. I didn't have to adopt these things completely as part of myself and as part of my psyche. And I learned that it didn't have to be an identity that I just couldn't stick to things. And so being able to take a step back and observe, it then put me in a position of power where I could decide what I would do in response to those thoughts. So for example, I have the thought, I just can't do this. I'm too tired to go to the gym. That's just a thought. It's not true. I'm not too tired. I'm awake. Of course I'm not too tired. Or, if I have the thought, well, I'm just always going to be the person who struggles with food, because that is something I used to tell myself. I was able to step back, observe, be curious and non-judgmental and go, okay, that doesn't have to be true. I can start making choices that don't align with that story. Because the thing is, when you believe these stories and these thoughts and you just treat them as pure and utter fact, you will subconsciously start making decisions and acting in line with those stories. And it's because they validate it. If you think you just can't diet, every single time you mess up, you're validating that story in your brain. And your brain's like, yes, see, I knew I was right. Because your brain loves to be right. So just being able to create that gap and to go, okay, I'm going to observe that story, I'm going to observe that thought, but I'm not going to act on it straight away. It will give you so much more power. You will learn that you can respond in a calm, calculated manner to some of these thoughts and some of these, initial, very emotional, highly charged thoughts. you can take a step back, you can take a breath, and you can just observe. So that alone, just understanding that I was not my thoughts, I was the one observing them, that completely just changed the way I acted, and it changed the way I showed up within my fitness goals and with everything else, but especially within fitness. And this kind of ties into the next massive shift for me, which more so relates to hunger and cravings, okay? And I know this is something that 99% of people struggle with when they're trying to diet, right? They're hungry, they have cravings, and that makes it difficult to stick to their plan. And I used to be the person that thought hunger was very scary. I thought if I was hungry, I needed to do something to fix it immediately, because if I felt hunger, I was bound to just binge or eat off plan. I was scared of cravings. I thought if I felt a craving for something, oh, I better do something about it right now, otherwise I'm just gonna have this craving forever. But what I learned is that hunger is just a temporary sensation that passes by. And it's similar to how in philosophy they discuss, every thought, every feeling, every emotion. It's almost like it's a cloud in the sky, right? Your mind is the blue sky, and those clouds can pass through and they can make it a little bit cloudy and a little bit grey, but they always pass by and the blue sky always remains behind. And I started to look at hunger and cravings in that way. Instead of being scared by these things, I just understood that they were temporary, fleeting feelings that would pass by. And it just gave me so much more ability to regulate myself in response to these feelings and in response to things like hunger and to things like cravings. I learned that hunger wasn't an emergency. It wasn't something that I had to do or that I had to fix. It was just part of being in a fucking deficit. Ultimately, hunger is just a sensation. It occurs in the present moment and it's temporary and it's safe. And again, the present moment, that's all we have. That's what so many of these books and these philosophers discuss, is that you don't need to worry about the future because it always arrives as the present. And so if I can sit with this in this present moment, eventually it will pass. And I realized that hunger, I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to act on it. And instead I could just observe it. And this is where one of the biggest teachings that I really took from the Stoics is, and that is that nothing is good or bad. Nothing is positive and nothing is negative. It is the meaning that we ascribe to it. And so for a lot of people, they have assigned a negative meaning to hunger. They think it's bad, they think it's scary, they think it's dangerous, but it's not. It's what we are perceiving it to be that ultimately dictates how we feel about it. And so I was able to flip my mindset and go, okay, well, actually, I'm trying to be in a calorie deficit, which means I am going to feel hungry. So actually, I can choose to look at a little bit of hunger as a positive thing. And just that alone has honestly made dieting so much easier for me. Because I used to be terrified, as I said, of hunger. I would do everything to avoid it. I would have all the high volume foods. I would overconsume 0-calorie things just because I needed my stomach to feel full. And just being able to understand that, hey, I don't have to choose hunger as a negative. I can choose hunger to be a positive thing. Again, within reason. Don't take that and fucking run with it, if you know what I mean. But a little bit of hunger in a diet, it's absolutely fine. And I think just being able to observe the feelings and the sensations and to remind myself that it's not necessarily a bad thing, it helped me so much within my fat loss efforts. And similarly, the same thing happened with emotions as well. I used to very much struggle with emotional eating. If I was lonely, if I was sad, if I was stressed, if I was anxious, I couldn't sit with those feelings. And so I would use food to numb them. I would overeat. And I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to. And so through reading a bit more about philosophy and especially delving into the Stoics in particular, I started to understand that no emotions are good and bad. They are just experiences. They are fleeting present moment experiences. They are just signals. They are there for a reason, but we don't necessarily need to do anything to get rid of those feelings. We can simply allow them to exist. Again, it's the clouds in the sky. Or another analogy I like is it's the ripples of the waves over the ocean. The ocean is still there, the waves will ripple, and they will eventually go away. We have to experience these things. It's just part of being a human. But no emotion is unsafe. If emotions were unsafe, we wouldn't have them. Sadness is safe. Loneliness is safe. Anxiety is safe. They are temporary, and often the best thing you can do with those emotions is to sit with them and to process them. And learning a little bit more about philosophy, it gave me so much more insight into what these emotions meant within myself and how I could manage them. And most importantly, that I didn't need to eat to get rid of those feelings, because that's what I used to believe. But by learning a bit more about philosophy and about these feelings, I understood that I could create a gap between feeling and response. So I can have the feeling that I am sad. I feel sadness right now, but that's okay. I don't need to do anything about that. So I was able to remove the judgment of these emotions, these things that I thought I shouldn't be feeling and that I needed to get rid of. And then that allowed me to process them so much better. And this is just an idea that came up again and again and again within all of these books that I was reading. You know, you read any of the Stoics, it's constantly nothing is good or bad. It is the meaning that you give to it. And I really, really, really tried to adopt that for myself. And it truly made the biggest difference to me, just regulating myself and not being a slave to overeating or drinking or numbing with any of these negative behaviors. Reading my philosophy also completely changed the way that I approach obstacles and challenges and setbacks, because I used to be the person that if something didn't work perfectly the first time, I would just give up. If I applied for a PhD position and I didn't get it, I just wouldn't even look for another one. If I was trying a new skill or a new hobby and I wasn't great at it the first time, I would just give up. You know, I was terrified of failure, and so I never really put myself in positions where I would fail. It was the same with dieting. If I started a diet and it didn't go perfectly, I would genuinely just give up, because again, it would reinforce that belief in my head that I just can't do this. But then I read a really incredible book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, where he really breaks down this idea that there is no such thing as failure. It's all feedback. It's all a lesson. It is all an opportunity to grow and to level up and to get better. And it just completely changed my mindset around any of these perceived challenges that I thought I had. And so instead of running from them, I actually started to embrace them. I looked forward to failing. I looked forward to messing up. I looked forward to getting things wrong, because I knew that every single time I did, I was going to gain some new insight or some new skill, some new ability that would let me better tackle that difficulty again in the future. If something went wrong, I would sit down with a pen and paper and a journal, and I would ask myself, okay, why did that go wrong? Where was I unprepared? If this same thing happens again, how am I going to handle it differently next time? And if I had never dove into philosophy, I don't think I would have developed that skill set of actually asking myself, how can I just get better? Because no one achieves anything great by just doing it easily and, you know, being amazing at it every single day. Everyone is going to fuck up. And that's okay. It is okay to fuck up. It's how you handle the fuck ups that ultimately matters, you know? And I learned failure, it doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means that this method just didn't work for me right now. Maybe this way of dieting didn't work for me right now, or this training split didn't work for me right now, or, you know, these supplements didn't work for me right now. And that's okay, because now I know what doesn't work for me. I am one step closer to figuring out what does work for me. I'm at a point now where I find fitness and bodybuilding, it's so easy for me. It is so easy for me to diet. It is so easy for me to grow muscle. And that's because I have built systems over the years that have allowed that to be the case. I know exactly how my days need to look to stick to my diet. I know exactly how my days need to look so that I can recover well from my training. The only reason I got here is because I fucked up a lot. You know, I was willing to fuck around and find out, and I really adopted this mentality of, if something doesn't work out for me, if something goes wrong, good, because that means I'm one step closer to getting it right. And truly, if you can learn to stop fearing failure and to stop running away from challenges and to embrace the hard and difficult and challenging things, I really do believe your ability to diet, stick to a deficit, train really fucking hard, it will level up. The hard shit is honestly what is going to make you. And that was an idea that, again, it came up in so many of these books again and again and again. It's not to bulk from the difficulties, not to run away from them, but to run headfirst towards them and actually embrace them and welcome them with open arms, because that is where you fucking level up. And finally, in terms of these core shifts, for me, it was the identity piece. So studying philosophy really changed the way I looked at and viewed identity. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts, you will know this is something I'm very passionate about, is operating from the identity of the person you want to become. So for example, I knew I kind of wanted to be a bodybuilder, but I was scared. I didn't really know if I could do it. But then one day I signed up with my coach for my first bodybuilding, prep, which was going to happen 2 years later, but I signed up with my coach. And from that day forward, in my mind, I was a bodybuilder. And all of a sudden, taking all of the actions became so much easier because they were actions in line with that identity of me as a bodybuilder. I had to be willing to show up as that person before I became that person. I had to act like a bodybuilder for years before I ever stood on stage and actually competed. It was the same with when I wanted to start my coaching business. I was terrified. I felt like such an imposter, but I had to show up as a confident coach before I had this, big business that I now have. But what I've realized from philosophy is that identity is something that you practice. It is something that you embody every single day. And the more you can understand the identity of that person you are trying to become. So for example, if you were trying to become a fit, healthy person, you need to sit with yourself and envision yourself as a fit and healthy person. And then you need to ask yourself, what does that version of me do? How does that version of me show up? What does that version of me's days look like? How does she eat? How does she train? How does she speak to people? How does she look after herself? Unless you can get clear on that identity, it's impossible to work backwards and start putting those actions into place today. So if you feel a bit of imposter syndrome, it's probably a good thing. And look at, okay, where's the gap between where I am now and that identity that I'm trying to be? And how do I start showing up as that person now? I now look at myself and I am a bodybuilder. I mean, obviously, I've competed many times at this point, but I show up as that version of me every single day, even when I don't feel like it, even when I'm tired, even when I'm hungry, because I have now built that identity for myself. It's so much easier for me to keep showing up in that manner. And I really do believe if you dive a little bit deeper into some of these books and start learning a little bit more about philosophy, it will give you so much more of a clearer idea and awareness of the gap between your current identity and the identity that you are trying to reach. So I guess to summarize, learning about philosophy, it didn't make me a better athlete or better at fitness because I, learned how to be more disciplined. What philosophy really gave me was more space. It gave me space between my thoughts and my actions. It gave me space between my emotions and my identity. And most powerfully, in that space, it gave me a choice. It gave me the place to choose who I wanted to be, to choose how I want to show up, and to choose how I wanted to interpret the world. And so in this series, I basically want to break this down into, going through a couple of my favorite books and discussing from each of them the main topics and the main reasons why I really do believe they shaped me and my own fitness journey so much. And that's because, again, I think at this point, if we could all learn a little bit more about our minds and the way that they work, I really do believe we would all be so much more healthier and happier. So I'm going to wrap up this video for now, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a like, give the video a comment, and you can look forward to more of these, fit philosopher videos soon.